At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Welcome to the show. Today I'm your host, Doug Crow, for the Author Brand Show, and I've got the most amazing guest on I've had in months. No disrespect to my previous guests. They're cool, they're wonderful, but this guy, holy crap. Imagine being a hostage negotiator for SWAT and being diagnosed with cancer. All right, what do those two things have in common? We're going to find out. We talked to Terry Tucker. So, Terry, welcome to the show today.
Doug, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
You bet. We're going to talk about your leadership skills and your book and whatnot, but before we do, we want to get right to it. Tell me about, all I know from SWAT was from the 80s TV show, right? I have no law enforcement experience whatsoever. I have a couple friends who are in it, but tell us how you got involved in that profession. I'm so curious.
So I was already a police officer with the Cincinnati Police Department, and SWAT are usually the best officers with the best training and the best equipment. And I've always wanted to be part of the best in my life.
Sure.
And so when there was an opening for the negotiators, I put in for it. Now, I'm in my 40s at this point in my life, and it's SWAT. So there's a lot of physical part of it, even though you're a negotiator. So I had to run the mile and a half, do the push-ups, sit-ups, meet with the psychologist, take psychological exams, meet with the command staff, and then finally meet with the team. And it was an all or nothing. If one person on the team said, hey, I don't like Terry, he's hard to work with or something like that, you didn't get on. And I was lucky. Everybody gave me the thumbs up, and I started, and just a quick funny story about it. The way we would train is we would do scenarios, and we had a psychologist that worked with us. And where we learned was in the debrief. Did you think this person might have had schizophrenia and off their meds? Whatever. So very simple. Hostage taker, behind the locked door. You're up, Tucker. Go ahead. Doug, I spent almost the entire time talking to the hostage. And they were like, you understand we're trying to negotiate with the hostage taker to get the person out. I'm like, yeah, I knew that, but for some reason, I don't know. I just enjoyed talking to the hostage.
Are you from Ohio?
No, I'm from Chicago originally.
Chicago, same thing, Midwest.
Midwest.
I grew up in Ohio, went to school in Chicago, stuck there for 20 years. So I think it's that Midwestern thing where we're just like friendly with everybody. That's my guess anyway.
Yeah, it was, well, okay, Terry, you got a lot to learn. And so that started the odyssey. So
okay. So anyway, you passed that thing and you got into the upper levels here as a negotiator. So we could talk a lot more about the background, but I want to hear about the first interesting negotiation you did.
Yeah, the first interesting negotiation was kind of a weird one. This was a guy who wanted to commit suicide. Yeah. And this started probably around dinner time. And he slit his wrists. That didn't work. Yeah. And then he got the brilliant idea to turn the gas on in his oven and stick his head in the oven. Well, that didn't work either. And then he called a relative, and the relative was smart enough to call the police, and we get there, and I'm talking to him. It's probably 3, 4 o'clock in the morning now. Yeah. And he's got a gun. And we're talking, and finally he just says, Terry, I'm really tired. I really want to come out.
Because your blood is flowing out of your body.
Exactly. So I said, do that. I said, come out. I said, and I will come down to the scene, and we will talk man to man. We will talk face to face. He's like, I'd really like that.
Wait, when you saw it on the scene, you were on site though, yeah?
Well, I was on site, but I was probably a block away talking to him on the phone.
Got it. Yeah.
And so I said, look, just go outside, put the gun down first, take the phone with you, don't hang up. Well, he ends up hanging up, which isn't uncommon. It's the end of the call. We're ingrained to do that. And about 30 seconds later, one of the tactical guys who had the house surrounded comes on the radio and says, we heard a gunshot.
Oh.
And I thought, you didn't. He did. Shot himself in the head. But it was not I shot myself in the head. We think it was, I don't really want to do this. He shot himself kind of at an angle like this. Yeah. The bullet went in right by his temple, around his skull, and came out the other side. Never penetrated his skull, never got to his brain. And, you always hear when it's your time, it's your time. But the opposite of that is true. When it's not your time, there's nothing you can do that's going to make it your time. And it wasn't his time at that point in time.
Fascinating. Yeah. I'm not saying anybody's religious or not. I don't really care. That is like, yeah, it's not your time. God's got other plans for you, man.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my.
So the bolt went around. He's bleeding, but did he?
Oh, it was terribly bloody because it's
yeah.
a head
Okay.
wound. Yeah. But in terms of seriousness,
Yeah.
not very serious at all. They took him to the hospital and then they put a 72-hour psych hold on him
Only
to try to
72.
get him the help he needed.
Do you ever don't know what happened to him after that at all? I mean,
No. I mean, we would.
like president or something, did he? Just asking.
I have no, we would get on, say we would do our thing, and then we would leave.
Yeah.
And I spent a number of years as an undercover drug investigator too. We would go in on a search warrant and tear a house apart or an apartment apart, and then just walk away.
Yeah.
Yep, found the drugs. See you, bye. Who takes care of this? Not us.
Yeah.
No,
I have a friend who took down MS-13s with the FBI, and he's working with state police, whatnot. And he had a lot of informants, and he was, he became kind of close to those guys, and one of them got killed once, and it kind of rattled him because he's supposed to protect his informants. But so yeah, you're like, okay, work's over, go home, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, we literally tore houses apart. I mean, we would take toilets off, we would take sinks out. Yeah. People would try to flush and pour drugs down the drain. I mean, we would literally do that if depending on who we were going after and stuff like that.
So I'm going to revert back to that. So any creative places to hide that were surprising to you?
Oh, yeah.
Not your body parts. I'm talking about the house itself.
No. Well, two quick stories. One, this house, the plumbing, the sewage was leaking into the basement. And they hid their drugs down there. So they would put on this suit to go down and get drugs when somebody came to the house. And they're thinking, we're not going to go down there and get it. It's we went down there and got it.
It's like I just rewatched the movie Lord of War, where he had all the weapons stored in the container with rotten potatoes in there. And
with Nicolas Cage, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's too stinky to go in there. I'm like, that's where it is. Interesting.
Well, and the other funny story, we pulled over a guy, and he had drugs in his car. He also had $88,000 in cash.
Okay.
And we were like, well, you realize now that we found drugs, that cash, we seize that. That's a forfeiture. Yeah. So why didn't you leave the cash at home? And here's the logic. Well, because everybody knows I'm a drug dealer, and if I left the cash at home, they just wait for me to leave, and then they break in the house and they'd steal my cash. So I just take it with me wherever I go. I'm like, well, okay, I can't argue with that.
You couldn't open up, 88 accounts for $1,000, I guess. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Under 10,000. Yeah, I had to under
right.
10. Yeah, okay, so 10 accounts or something like that. All right, cool. Well, that's great. I'm sure you got more stories. We may come back to one or two, but we got to find out this intersection between what you're doing now, being an author, talking about leadership and whatnot, and how that relates with your cancer stuff. So tell me what you've learned from being in law enforcement, to how it applied, or if you want to actually backtrack in terms of how you've discovered the cancer in the first place, and we can pull it together.
Yeah, sure. So in 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach, and I was an NCAA Division I college basketball player. So I'm coaching girls' high school. I have a callus break open on the bottom of my foot. And initially don't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. Yeah. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment, went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, who takes an x-ray and says, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It's just a little gelatin sac, some white fat in it, no big deal. But he sends it off to pathology, and 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I mentioned, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming. Until finally he just lays it out for me and says, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most people think that's too much exposure to the sun. Mine has nothing to do with sun. It is just a weird form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. He recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. Mm-hmm. I did. And that's where they told me, well, you'll more than likely be dead in 2 years. Okay. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Yeah. How can I turn that death sentence into a life sentence? And I think, Doug, when you I've done so much physical stuff in my life, college basketball, SWAT, all that stuff. Uh-huh. Now you would know this, but I'm in a wheelchair and I've had my left leg amputated. Uh-huh. What do you do when you can't do what you're good at.
Hey,
I think you do what's important.
Dramatic pause there. We're going to get into this is the meat of it, because we have a couple clients with in your similar situation where they've been had to have a limb removed or were born without one, and people, my dad always told me, as soon as you complain about shoes, look at a boy with no feet type of thing. So I that is such a seminal moment where you're an athlete, you're active, and this thing comes in and damn it, takes a leg off. That's just what. Tell me, take some time and tell us what went through your mind and and how you got back on your foot as opposed to feet. I joke.
Yeah, really, exactly. Shoes are now half off for me.
Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah, half price sale, right?
I mean, I lost my foot in 2018. They took that first, and then they took my leg during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was so surreal. It was like literally one day, hey, you've got tumors in your lungs and we have to take your leg off because your entire lower leg is full of cancer. And 5 days later, I am by myself in an an operating room because it was COVID. I couldn't have, my wife couldn't come with me. You're going to be in the hospital 10 to 14 days. They sent me home after 48 hours. I'm like, you just took my leg off. I know, get out of here. We don't want you in the hospital.
You're healthy. You're an athlete.
And it was, okay, now we got to figure this out. And really, I think at this point in my life, I've learned a lot of things, but two things I want to give you that I've learned from cancer is, one, I don't think you truly know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity in your life. I mean, for me, it's cancer. And the second thing, and this is going to sound kind of weird probably to your audience, cancer's made me a better human being. I mean, I've been asked, if you could live your life over again without cancer, would you do it? And honestly, Doug, I don't think I would. I mean, everything I've been through, I would take that because it's made me a better human being.
It's not the first time I've heard this. There's a book out there. I didn't finish it. Sorry. It's called Crazy Sexy Cancer. It's written by a woman who went through it, and she had a similar vein of what it was about. And yeah, there were some dips in her life, but yeah, it made her stronger, smarter, wiser. And she said sexier and all that, losing a breast, whatever it was. So I'd like to hear more about how you were able to actually make that transition. Because gosh, there must have been a low point before you got resilient on that. No, or how fast did you go? Okay, move on.
Well, initially, like I said, they said you'll be dead in 2 years. But they put me on this drug called interferon. And I took a weekly interferon injection. And what the side effects of the interferon was that I had terrible flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after those injections.
Yeah.
And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having a terrible case of the flu every week for 5 years. And as my doctor used to say, Terry, this isn't a cure. We're just kicking the can down the road. And honestly, Doug, there was a time where, I kind of felt there were two camps. There was the people that were living, and then there was the people that were not dying. And I was in that not dying camp. Didn't feel I was contributing in any way. I begged God to take me. I said, please take me out of this. Please get me out of this. And I literally was so sick of being sick that I literally prayed to die. It's like, come on, be done with this. But then I think you get to a point where you find the meaning in your misery. There's a reason you're going through this. I thoroughly believe that. No matter what you go through in your life, there's a reason, there's a lesson, there's something you're supposed to learn about yourself, about life, about somebody, whatever it is. And I think that was kind of the seminal moment for me where, okay, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I do not like the cards I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play them to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Amazing. How long did it take you to get to that point where you're like, okay, embrace the suck?
It took me a couple of years. I will at least admit
that's better than never. Exactly.
Exactly.
About a couple of years, that's pretty common, I would think.
Yeah. But again, I talk about what's gotten me through this, and I call it my 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends, literally in that order. I have a very strong faith in God. I honestly believe my purpose now is for God to use me to show people, use my infirmity, use my malignancy to show people his goodness, his mercy, his love, his grace, his healing. And I mean, Doug, when I had my leg amputated, I also found I had tumors in my lungs. And my oncologist showed me my CAT scan. Yeah. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and be like, oh, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. You know, I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces. And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, how was I alive? And Doug, till the day I die, I will never forget this. He put his head down. He shook his head no. And then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. Which said to me, God's not done with me. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend much time worrying about the dying. Spend more time focused on the living.
Wow. What, you have your book there? Hold your book up. People they may still listen to us for another 15 minutes, but we need to get this. Sustainable Excellence by Terry Tucker, folks. Oh my gosh. This is great. How much are you able to get out and do speaking and like do inspirational talk stuff around the area, or what are you doing?
I around the area, yeah, I do more, virtual stuff if it's farther away and things like that. I mean, I need my wife's help, put the wheelchair in the car and everything else and stuff. So, it's kind of I've got a roadie with me. My wife is my roadie, so.
That's where the second one comes in, faith and then family. Right?
That's right. That's where exactly.
Right. Oh my gosh. And so you sat down, you wrote this book, and tell me about that experience. A lot of people, we are a ghostwriting publishing company, so I'm always curious when people sit down and write their own thing. Was that cathartic? Was it more helpful for the people who read it? Tell me about your journey with the writing of the book.
Sure. So Sustainable Excellence is really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school. I mentioned I coached girls high school basketball, who moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. Yeah. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was really excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Doug, she got real quiet for a while. And she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then the other one was a young man who reached out to me on social media from college, and he said, what do you think are the most important things I should learn? Not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him that, get up early, work hard, help. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches. So I spent some time taking some notes and eventually kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. Mm-hmm. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle. Sure. Or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the 10 principles. Wow. That's how Sustainable Excellence came to be.
Outstanding. We're not going to reveal all 10 principles, but I'd like to hear at least one or two of them. So give me a couple of those principles and one story to...
Sure. So, and I put this in there because I did this in my life, and I'm not proud that I did it. And the principle is this: most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I know I've...
We all do. We all
I want to start this... Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or I don't have enough information, or what will people think about me? Yeah. And whenever especially when I talk to young people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Yep. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do, but then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, brilliant. Wow. So, what was the one thing that scared you that you leaned into then?
Having my leg taken off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, how am I going to, what do you mean I'm going to be in wheels? And I mean, it's weird because our house, the bedroom and the bathroom doors are not wide enough for my wheelchair. So I have to transition to a walker to go to the bathroom and go to bed, which is good. It just gets me out of my chair and, I can get up and stuff. So it's like, again, you figure it out or you don't, and you wallow in it and feel sorry for yourself. Like, I'm not feeling sorry. I'll figure this out.
Right. Amazing. I love that perspective and attitude. And I'm glad that you were saying, hey, it took 2 years to get to the point where, it's full steam ahead. That's that's people, a lot of times they'll look at like weight loss journeys. They show before and after pictures, like, wow, look what you did. Yeah, you didn't see the 3 years of pain and suffering to get there, right? You just go for that instant gratification. So that's why it's important. I'm glad you were able to, share that. It's not fast right away. And
No.
and my buddy Les, I told you about, he, he's a realist, but he has days where he's, sad or mad, and it happens.
It does. And I mean, I'm still treated every 3 weeks at the hospital for the tumors I have in my lungs.
Right.
I have a very bad reaction. And when I'm in that state, I get down, I cry, I feel sorry for myself, but it's a choice to stay there, or it's a choice to say no. And a very simple way I find to do this, and I think this works for everybody, is if you're feeling sorry for yourself, go help somebody else. Just go say hi to somebody. Go smile at somebody. Do anything. Now you're not focused on you. You're focused on somebody else.
That's right, George Bailey. You got it. That's the way it works. Absolutely. Oh, my gosh. So many questions for you. I'd like to understand. God, what was it? I had a really good question. It's gone. My gosh.
It's tough getting old, isn't it?
It is. Thank you very much. You look great here. There's when you Zach, right now, what do you do now? Do you just speak, or you still working? What's your?
I do. I just finished another book, and I'm working to kind of clean that up now. I do speak, not as much as I'd like to. I mean, it's something I enjoy doing. I love the energy that I can get from other people.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a blog. I put out a blog every once a week. One's written, one's a video. And the video is more just to help me to be a better speaker, because as you can figure out, I talk too fast, kind of to slow down and things like that.
That's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I have to tell people to listen faster if you can't keep up.
Yeah, exactly. Get some Q-tips, clean that out.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's wonderful. And the other question I have, I guess, is so you're going through this personally for yourself. Tell me about how it was with your family, having Dad go from this athlete to this guy in the wheelchair.
Well, when I was diagnosed, our daughter was in high school. And, there was sort of a bargaining, with God. And it's like, please let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And I mentioned my family, and it's this is a true story. So I had my leg amputated. My doctor's like, I want to put you on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I said, is it going to save my life? He said, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. I said, well, if the outcome is going to be that I'm going to die anyway, I would rather not go through all that ugliness, but I'll go home and talk to my family.
Okay.
True story. Funny story. And so I go home and start talking, and it's just my wife and daughter and myself, and I'm like, okay, here's what the doctor wants. And my daughter's like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that,
Well, ship out the old block. I like her already.
Yeah. So we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we feel about me having chemo. And then when we're done, she's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want Dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raise their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemo, not because I wanted to, but because I love my family more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the bridge drug that got me to the clinical trial drug that I've been on for almost 4 years now.
And there you have it, folks. Full circle. From SWAT negotiator to family negotiator. That's just, there we go. See, I knew they connected.
There you go.
It totally works. It totally works. Terry, amazing stuff. Hold that book up one more time. I want to see that cover up. We got to get you on some stages here. Okay, The Sustainable Excellence by Terry Tucker. Inspiration with some meaning and purpose. And gosh, you're just so much fun to listen to. We could go out for the rest of the day, but obviously we have things to do here. Yes. So it's great having the show today. Any last words of wisdom?
I'll leave you with this quote from Ernest Hemingway, that I absolutely love. This is in A Farewell to Arms, which is a semi-autobiographical book kind of about his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And the quote is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. I love that quote.
Yeah, it's very good. Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. This is Doug Crow from the Author Brand Show with my good friend and my inspiration, my new mentor, Terry Tucker. Thanks so much.
Thank you.